Hey, welcome to the AZ Political Podcast. I'm Jim Sharpe. Headline number one this week, Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs announced her first Arizona Supreme Court appointment. It's Judge Maria Elena Cruz of the Arizona Court of Appeals, a position in which she was placed in 2017 by Republican Governor Doug Ducey. Justice Cruz told LaDonna Harvey and me on Arizona's Morning News that she's been a prosecutor and a defense attorney, so it sounds like Justice Cruz will bring some balance of thought to the scales of justice at the state's highest court. Headline number two, a new poll finds that if Arizona's Republican primary for governor were held today, current East Valley Congressman Andy Biggs would win, which brings two questions to mind. Number one, since that election's 18 or 19 months away, why is anybody doing polling on this? And question number two, why am I talking about it? Headline number three, everyone is wondering, how will what's been promised to be the biggest mass deportation in America's history affect Arizona's agricultural industry, which provides much of the country's fresh produce? And how much will President Trump's threatened 25% tariffs against Mexico and Canada, which is Arizona's number one and number two trading partners, affect our state's overall economy? All right, let's get to meeting our guest here on the AZ Political Podcast. Is Matt Kenney, who's a U.S. Army combat veteran, served as an infantry officer, if I can say it, during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and in the 1st Advise and Assist Battalion during Operation New Dawn, which was the follow-up to OIF. Matt's a veterans advocate, currently serves on the Veterans Advisory Committee, but why are you having him on the AZ Political Podcast, Jim? Well, that's because Matt is a partner in the PR, public affairs, and political strategy firm Echo Canyon Consulting, and formerly served as both the senior advisor for and executive director of the Arizona Republican Party. Welcome, Matt.
Jim, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Sure. And let me say this first up, and I can say this like 99.9% of civilians can't say it because I've been in combat. Thank you for your service to veterans as well.
Appreciate it. It's been an honor of a lifetime. I really enjoyed and learned a lot from my service. And, you know, I had some injuries, and so I got out, but I think I probably would still be in now if I couldn't. And so this is another way for me to give back. And it's going to be something I do for the rest of my life. And I don't plan on going anywhere.
And you went into the slightly less dangerous world of politics,
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Yeah. So this is really tough for Arizona because we see firsthand how illegal immigration negatively affects our state's resources, especially for border communities, but how important our relationship is to Mexico and how important, immigration, even illegal immigration, is to our agricultural industry. So how do you balance that out as an Arizona Republican?
Yeah. So the first thing that I think of, too, is, Biden really ran on a platform of being a centrist. And I think that you had Border Patrol officials all throughout his term trying to raise the red flag and say, hey, this is a serious concern. You had some really good reporting going on, too, that I'm sure you've seen. That was kind of highlighting the number of gotaways that we got continually, right? And not only the number of gotaways, but then you're also seeing the number of people on the federal terrorist watch list go up. And now we have over 100 people that are kind of wandering around America on the federal government watch list. You have 30,000 Chinese nationals that are somewhere within America. And while, I was, and I always have wanted to see us improve our immigration system. And I thought some of the things that Arizona politicians have worked on in the past have been really good solutions, even though they didn't pass. But when you're seeing about 2,000 people in Arizona die from fentanyl overdoses almost every single year, I think that we as Arizonans and not just Republicans, but I think it's across the board, don't want to see criminals, whether they're foreign criminals or criminals at our streets. And so I think that what we've seen initially from the Trump administration seems to be, targeting the most violent criminals and getting them off of our streets. I think that that's important. Mm-hmm. We've seen the number of headlines of criminal illegal immigrants doing follow-on crimes and hurting people, right? Lake and Riley being the most famous example of that. Look, at the same time, I'm a free trade advocate. I think that the relationship that we have with Mexico and Canada is extremely important for the United States. They're our closest ones to our borders. And so I think that it's strategically important for us to maintain those strong relationships. And I know that trade is certainly very important too. So I think, and what I'm hoping happens is this kind of forces cooperation, dialogue, and some planning between all three of those countries. Look, President Trump often uses his kind of strategy of the art of the deal to try to get things done. And so what I'm hoping here too is that these are kind of tactical deportations of people that we really don't want in our community and don't deserve to be in our country.
The kind of deportations that Obama was doing.
That's true.
You go after criminals.
Yeah.
Those who are actually harmful to the migrant community.
Yeah.
Even.
But what's really interesting about that, and hopefully this will maybe be something other Republicans and conservatives can think about too, is we have our friend Elon Musk, who's constantly talking about the birth rates going down in the country and what a big problem that is, and so we want more people to come to America. Now, we want them to come through the proper process. We need to improve that process. But I don't think that we should ever be a nation that is anti-immigration. I think that we always want to be a very pro-immigration country, and that's what we were founded on. My family on my dad's side is all from Boston, Massachusetts, and my grandmother is a big lover of American history. This is kind of funny. My grandmother was in Massachusetts, big Democrat state, was the president of the League of Women Voters, and somehow I turned out a Republican.
Well, I'm married to someone from Worcester.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she's a conservative public school teacher from Massachusetts,
wow.
So maybe even more rare.
No, I know.
Yeah.
So my grandmother used to take us all over and, teach us American history too, and take us to Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty.
Cool.
And that's what this country was all about, and that's what one of the things that makes this country truly great is so many of our heroes were first generation immigrants.
So when you said art of the deal, I was obviously I think you were referring to the tariffs, but is there also some art of the deal involved in saying, hey, we're going to deport people, and we're going to deport people on a massive level, that you end up with some people going, all right, I'm going to self-deport, and it helps solve some of the problems.
Yeah, no, I think that has been a natural effect of what he's doing. Early on, I was very critical of what President Trump was doing, but when you look at it through the lens of, he sees himself as the leader who needs to, if he is going to make some sort of change or some sort of impact, right? And so, I think he does, and he's said before that sometimes he says things to bring attention to the issue, and sometimes he does it, and maybe not in the way you and I would, but it brings attention to the issue, and sometimes the outcome turns out good for America. And yeah, it's early in the term too, and so I'm remaining optimistic about this. And I was very frustrated with what was going on over the past 4 years. So that's all you can do is be optimistic about the future of the country.
Yeah, you said he doesn't do things like maybe you or I would, but you could argue that Donald Trump doesn't do things like anybody else would.
No, that's true.
He is his own person. They broke the mold, right?
Yeah, he absolutely did.
And I think that's why he's so beloved by a lot of people.
No, I was at the inauguration.
Oh, were you?
And I was, there for about 5 days. And, the energy and the support that he has, and you have it from a variety of different people and backgrounds. And he really has built himself a Reagan-like coalition.
Arizona's got a large number of active duty and retired military personnel and veterans here. How does the Trump presidency help them?
I think that there were a lot of veterans who have been frustrated by the distractions when we're on active duty. And I think that, the Trump administration brought in people who want to be focused on the fundamentals of, military operations. And so, on the military side, I do think that we're optimistic about the direction that our military is going to go. On the veteran side, too, I'm hoping that we can look at some sort of reforms. Look, I've been a patient of the Phoenix VA for over a decade, and I think that we've seen some improvements. I think that the work that Senator McCain did with others on the choice card has changed some veterans' lives completely and for the better, right? Yeah. But I do think also that maybe the VA needs a drastic change because they're not admitting some of the things that are going to be constant problems. Look, we have an entire generation of basically GWAT veterans who are going to be retiring and getting out of the military. All of my friends, so I got out earlier.
Explain that term, by the way, GWAT.
So sorry, the Global War on Terror, that's sort of like a term that we use for all the veterans of this sort of generation who have been involved in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. And so if you think I would be hitting my 17th or 18th year right now if I were still in. So I'm getting close to retirement, right? And that's all of my friends, all the guys that I went through training with, right? They're all going to be retiring. And I'll tell you, they're all busted up, right? Most of these guys have 5-6 deployments. And so where I was going with that is, she may have been exaggerating because we were kind of joking around a little bit. But my VA doctor, I was like, how many patients do you have? My primary care doctor. And she said, over 1,000. Right. And the problem here, right, is there's no way to, I think, bring in enough of the infrastructure and the doctors and the people that you really need. But what I've noticed really is the best VA care facilities that we have are also usually partnering with universities and partnering with the cities that are there. And so all of that is to say that I think that maybe the VA can focus its attention on things that it's maybe an expert in, right? Like amputee care, PTSD, really back problems, because we're all dealing with tons of back problems. Yeah. But I really mean these kind of hearing loss, right? These kind of things that are specific to the military and the veteran community, and how we might be able to prevent those in the future, and how do we deal with them now. And allow our veterans to just go into the regular hospital system if they have a broken leg or a cold or need diabetes medication or things like that. Now, there's no reason why the VA doesn't still cover it, right? In the same way that TRICARE covers us when we're on active duty when we go to any hospital. So I think that there is probably some sort of opportunity here. You've seen the people that Donald Trump wanted around him and in his cabinet, and they're all think outside the box. Let's try to make some big core changes. And I do think that you've got guys like Darren Selnick, who really worked hard on a lot of that VA reform for the past 2 decades. Mm-hmm. I really think that you're going to get some great ideas from people like that. And so I'm really optimistic about the things that we might be able to see. On the other side of the aisle, give credit where credit is due. You also have Ruben Gallego as a U.S. Senator now. He is a combat veteran. He's lived that experience too. I'm sure that his insights will be good. You have Abe Hamadeh and Eli Crane, who are both military veterans now serving on the Republican side. So Arizona, I think, does have some pretty good representation. Sorry, of course, Senator Mark Kelly. How many sorties did he fly? Yeah, and he's definitely the highest ranking and the most experienced. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave Senator Kelly out. I sort of think of him more of the astronaut, right? And sometimes I forget that he flew in Desert Storm too. Yeah. So anyway, I just think that Arizona has a really good compilation of military men representing us, and that's got to make anyone hopeful.
Before we started taping, you'd mentioned that Pete Hegseth, and of course he's been approved as the Secretary of Defense. I remember years ago I had a friend who was a Marine working at the VA here in Phoenix, who was hoping and praying that Hegseth would become the VA guy. How confident do you feel about Pete Hegseth in charge of the Pentagon?
I'm confident in Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. Pete and I first met each other, interestingly, and this is a good segue, I think, when the VA scandal happened. And it happened right here in Phoenix. And maybe other Arizonans don't know this, but this was a national issue. I mean, it galvanized the veteran community to see reform and changes. You had veterans who were dying on waiting lists, right? And Pete led the reform effort. And you know, he did so with people like Senator McCain and Governor Doug Ducey, who both worked with him on the VA reforms for Concerned Veterans for America. But, you know, I had also the opportunity of working on the state level for that organization. And I think that we brought about a lot of great change. You know, at the height, you know, it is a nonprofit organization, but we had thousands of staff members and tens of thousands of volunteers. And you know what? Like, the organization really was never the same when Pete left and went over to Fox News. But I got to see firsthand that leadership that he has and his ability to communicate a vision. And it's a very unique skill. I've had the opportunity of my final job at the military was a senior advisor. There are a few over the infantry officer basic course. So we take all of the second lieutenants in from ROTC and OCS and from West Point, and this is their first 17-week program into kind of becoming an officer. And you know, I think that there are a lot of other experiences I've gone through that you know, make me a good judge of character and leadership. But that in itself, watching class after class go through and see people after people. And I'll tell you that Pete Hegseth has a unique style of leadership. I also think that his experiences in both Iraq, Afghanistan, and interestingly in Cuba give him a lot of insight into what it was like to be. I mean, he was one. He was a GWOT veteran too, right? And he served in each of the different areas. I wanted to see somebody younger too. I wanted to see, you know, somebody with fresh ideas, and you didn't see the military changing in the way that I think the American public wanted to see them change. I love the F-35. It's the most advanced fighter on the planet. I don't know that it needed to cost us as much as it did.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Constant cost overruns, constantly blowing off the timeline, right? That's what we're seeing in the shipbuilding industry, in the Air Force. And like, if we have a competitor who has an authoritarian government and basically, you know, can make ships at an incredible rate these days, I really feel like the bureaucracy has to change in the DoD for us to start to streamline some of those operations again. And so, look, like what I've also learned about leadership and about the head of an organization is he dictates a vision, right? And that vision for him was really focused back on the lethality of the military. Right. And I think that what's interesting about especially the military, and this is a greater example for, I think, other industries and society in general, is if you're focused on being like the perfect warfighter, and you got to think about this in practical terms, right? It's like, you know, you think about your soldiers who are out like working on the vehicles, or you got your infantrymen, and we'd be down at the range, or we'd be building up to small unit tactics, to, you know, platoon size level, to company level, and that's sort of what you're doing, and that's where your focus is, right? What was frustrating for service members was like when they were supposed to get home and have their downtime, right? They were handed hours of classes that they needed to take to instruct them on different policies. I went through the Don't Ask, Don't Tell era, so I kind of remember exactly what it was like to implement that into the Army as an officer. And I'm not saying that it didn't educate some soldiers on, like, you know, being more empathetic and more understanding of, you know, their fellow soldier too. But at the same time, that actually works itself out on its own, right? Because if you are all trying to, you know, row the ship in the right direction, you guys are all trying to get really good at, you know, running an ambush. What you look like, you know, has nothing to do with it. Your preferences, that doesn't matter, because all we really want to care about is like being really good at this one thing. And so, I think it's a positive change to have somebody who wants to see those changes and who wants to get the military back focused and become the efficient, lethal killing machine that it was meant to be.
And it was an Arizona Republican who was a veteran himself, who said, "I don't care if you can shoot straight. I don't care if you are straight as long as you can shoot straight."
That's right. I love it.
Yeah. So yeah.
Look, and here's the other thing too is, let's be honest, like there have been service members of every different variety long before we decided, like, hey, let's address this and let's like talk about it within the military. And we're like, well, like, why? We're like, you know what I mean? Like, we don't need to have a policy on this. We need to actually dissuade people from bringing that stuff into the military. This is a profession. You remember, this is the profession of arms, and what we want to be focused on is that war fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think bringing anything else into it, right, is just a mistake. If you talk about like any politics, could you imagine if they're like, hey, let's do a class. Let's talk about how you feel about this partisan issue. And you're like, I'm sorry, why are we doing this? And why can't I just go fix my Humvee?
Right. Why can't I go make sure? Why can't you spend the money on making sure I've got a level 4 vest, you know?
Yeah, no kidding, right? We like ended up, anyway, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts as a supporter of Donald Trump, as a Republican? What are your thoughts on that pause that the administration tried to do on loans and grants, basically state, money that was coming from the federal government to the states, not money that was going to individuals, and how that would affect, Arizona's ability to help individuals here in the state, including veterans?
Yeah. Look, I think that if it was, it seems to me what the administration is trying to do is sort itself out and figure out which things are good uses of taxpayer dollars and which aren't.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the response from, some members of Congress too, and I think I agree with this, that, look, any type of pause on funding like that needs to be temporary. We don't want to exacerbate something like the veteran homeless problem that we currently have.
Yeah.
And so, I would really hope that our federal members of Congress who have served in the military before too and understand what some of these programs are and what the benefits are used for would make sure that they get the attention of the president and voice their concern for those.
So kind of one of those, you think it's another, place where Donald Trump is just saying, it's going to be like this. And what he really means is it's going to be like this. But he scares everybody because he's out here thinking that they'll go ahead and we'll back it off up to here.
Well, it might be that case. I wonder if also, too, it really was supposed to be a temporary pause, and maybe they were trying to work some things out and there was a justification for it. And so I'm not sure. I hope any freeze that we have in veteran or military benefits is only temporary.
Yeah. But even that temporary pause can cause a lot of problems for some people who are counting on that money, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes let's remember too that usually, our federal budget allocates the money for the next year or two. And so like we're usually funded through most of those programs through the end of the fiscal year.
Right.
Right. And so, no, I do think that it does cause real problems. I was very frustrated, when politics enters into the functioning of our military, like not being able to get, some of these leaders, purely military leaders, into the positions that they needed to through the confirmation hearings. That was frustrating for me.
As a former executive director of the state Republican Party, advisor there,
Yeah.
You run a political firm and public affairs firm.
Yep.
Who do you think is going to be the next generation of leaders, Republican leaders in Arizona? And I'm nothing against Congressman Biggs, but
Yeah.
he's not maybe quite as young and vital as like a Matt Kenney. Is there any thoughts for you, like taking your own advice and becoming not just a political consultant, but a politician as well?
No, I appreciate that. I think that there is definitely a new generation, starting to come up through the ranks. I think, the first of them that I could think of really is Abe Hamadeh, who's, pretty young guy. I think he's like 32 years old and a United States congressman. Eli Crane is pretty young himself. I think that you're also starting to see some younger leaders down at the legislature. I had the opportunity of working for Arizona PAC on the political side, and that was that kind of joint venture between Karen Taylor Robeson and Jim Click down in Tucson. They raised about $2 million to defend some of these competitive seats and try to pick up some others in the legislature. So through that, I got, the opportunity to meet a lot of these candidates too and vet them. And I think that you have a lot of really great young people down at the legislature. I don't agree with all of the things that they do, but you have good organizations you have organizations that are trying to bring in that younger generation too, like Turning Point USA, and you still have Young Americans for Liberty and Young Americans for Freedom, and so I do think that we're doing a good job. Me running for office, I'm not sure if that's in the cards, honestly. I've got 2 young daughters. I've got a wife and a whole life already kind of put together.
Yeah.
And also
politics can screw that all up.
Yeah, no, it totally can, and I've seen it, right? I've seen it behind the scenes.
Yeah, totally.
And I really love politics, and I really want to try to bring attention to issues I really care about and bring some positive change. And I think that there will be opportunities for me to do that in the future. But like I said, Jim, I'm not going anywhere. So it kind of seems better to me to get my kids off to college, and then if I want to run for office, dedicate all of my time to it. I want to be a good leader in Arizona. I wouldn't want to, be splitting my time between all of these different interests. And also, our legislators make $26,000 a year, and I think that's where I could probably do a lot of good. I think, Congress, you're flying back and forth. I think that obviously probably played a small part in Debbie Lesko and maybe even Andy Biggs too, right? I think
that gets old.
That gets old, and so I don't know. I just think that I'll know that it's the right decision when it is, and it'll all make sense. But currently, I like what I'm doing right now, and it's a lot of fun, and I love being able to help people that I get the opportunity to.
Well, I like what you're doing too.
Thanks.
So. Appreciate your time, man. It's been good to get to know you.
It was great to get to know you too.
Mike Broomhead was telling me what a great guy you are, and I was just like, okay.
I really appreciate it. Oh, well, thank you so much.
I don't ever take Mike's word for anything, honestly. So, right?
Well, I love Mike. He is he has an incredible reputation, especially among law enforcement too.
Yeah. We call him Captain Cop.
Captain Cop. I could understand that. You should every time that anything goes on, they're like, we got to get on Broomhead. We got to talk about it. And I'm like, right. I was like, but I think that his listeners like us. You know what I mean? Let's go into some other shows. But I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Once again, Matt Kenney. I'm Jim Sharpe. Thanks for watching the AZ Political Podcast, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks for watching the AZ Political Podcast with Jim Sharpe. Click the box to watch more from KTAR News and tap the button in the middle to subscribe.